Welcome to another episode of Tomes and Tunes. We are on episode 47, I think. Yes, 47. And I am Arielle Silver, your host from Los Angeles, singer-songwriter. I'm originally from the East Coast and love the East Coast, but living here in beautiful Los Angeles. Everything is in bloom. The orange tree outside my window is now almost bare of blossoms. They have already blossomed. The squirrels have run rampant through the tree, and now they are all on the ground. It is a beautiful carpet. And every week on this show, I talk about books and songs and the creative process, and who knows what else comes up with songwriters from all around the place, all around the world. But today, my guest is from Los Angeles, and I am very happy to bring on Matthew Moran. Matthew, come on in. Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thanks
I'm
for
looking
being
forward
here.
to it.
Yeah, me too. So you and I met in 2019, October, and we were at a music conference.
Far West.
Far
Yeah.
West, yeah, Regional Folk Alliance Conference, and I was doing a workshop. I had recently, earlier that year, had run a Kickstarter campaign to raise awareness of me coming back to songwriting after a 10-year hiatus, and then also to raise funds to record my new album that came out this year. And you were helping me out with some of the IT glitches that we were experiencing that day, and then we got to talking at the end of the workshop, and it was just like, it was really lovely to talk with you and meet you, and so this is great to have you on the show.
Oh, I appreciate that. I was so impressed with your presentation, and I had, as you know, I'm running between the rooms, just making sure kind of the technology, everything's in place. But I kept coming back in, going, "Wow, this is really thorough." Like you really had a map. I mean, I've said, and I don't know if you've done this yet, that you should make a video of that presentation, and I'd publish it. I think there are a lot of artists that could learn a lot from that.
I learned, I mean, that's the way it is, right? It's all word of mouth. I learned everything I knew, both from word of mouth and other artists having done it and watching what they were doing, and then just trying to pass on the word, what I learned from the direct experience. I heard this awesome quote recently. I don't remember who said it, but the quote is essentially, the difference between theory and practice is that in theory there's no difference, and in practice there is. And that was like, when you read about how to run a crowdfunding campaign versus when you actually run the crowdfunding campaign, it's like, okay, now I get it. And but then the campaign is over, and you just kind of want to share what you learned. That was at least my experience. So
Derek Sivers has this approach where, and I kind of broke it down to these because I do a lot of tutorials and presentations, and I always say that, or his take on it was, once you learn something, you should try and teach it. And it really does two things. One, you're sharing information that people might need. You're also exposing things that you may not have exactly right, or might be able to fine tune, and somebody can have input, but if they don't know what you're doing, they wouldn't know. So that's another thing. And then finally, the act of synthesizing something to teach someone else really makes you codify it and go, oh, what did I do? Because sometimes in the act of doing, we're so busy in the doing that we're not really stopping and going, oh, okay, this is how you know what I mean? So there's a benefit to teaching others, I think.
Oh, absolutely. 100% agree with that. Yeah, there's a certain amount of intuition that comes in when you're in the middle of the execution of something that you wouldn't have necessarily had that foresight, but then when you're in the middle of it, you're like, oh, this is the course of action I need to take right now. And that's the sort of stuff that then becomes the body of knowledge that you then carry. And could be forgotten unless you then teach and pass it on. Yeah, totally.
I mean, in the corporate, so I do consulting in the corporate world, and in the corporate world, one of the challenges you face all the time is, how do we get the knowledge that people have at their individual desks and make it knowledge for the company? Because people find ways to do things. Same thing. You find ways to do things. And if that person leaves, those little bits of knowledge are gone, and they may not even know it. Once again, it's like I work all day and I'm doing Google Docs and I'm doing whatever I'm doing. And when I stop and think about it, I go, wait, if I copy and paste this here, so the formatting gets, like, I have little processes I do that are internal to me. I figured them out over time. So I think that's another reason that's a really helpful exercise, right?
Yeah, yeah. That just reminded me that a few weeks ago, as I was setting up my week's episode for Tomes and Tunes, I was like, I really should write down all the steps that I take to set up the show, and what do I do every Monday to prepare for it. And as I was just jotting down everything I did, I was like, oh wow, there's a dozen different steps, and I was like, oh, okay, now it's like I've been doing this for 40 something weeks and had just been intuitively kind of navigating, what I had to do moment by moment, but to actually write it down.
And there are probably, once again, like I said, there are gotchas you've probably solved that other people right now are running into, right?
Right.
And so, so anyways, yeah, that is the interesting part of any, look, the same would be true for, Far West setting up workshops, right? Like how I had to do that and contact people, is, and there was information passed to me, then there were things I did differently. And then I was like, oh, this, I didn't have this ready. I didn't have this information last year. I need to have it this year, so it's that kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. So just before this show went on, we were talking about your kids. You have 4 kids, and
Yes.
we were talking about I don't know, there was just like a lot of richness that just came into our conversation that, it's like I always have these great conversations in the green room before we go live, and I want to capture a little bit of it. You talked about your youngest daughter and her high school of the performing arts, and going down to the underage punk rock club that my older stepdaughter used to go down to in downtown LA, and where kids could just rock out at 18 years old or whatever, 16, and just have a great time. And then you talked about your other daughter, who is a professional climber in Colorado, I think.
Oregon.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you talked about the Women's March and your older son who's a programmer, and then your younger son. And I want to, if you're willing, I would like to pick up on that conversation, because that's something that I don't. This is a topic about addiction and about living on the street and about just some things that we have not spoken about in the 46 previous weeks on this show. We've talked about a lot of different topics, but you were talking about grace and your relationship to your son, and how your older son sort of has helped you, I guess, evolve in how you have been navigating that very difficult situation, I guess, heartbreaking situation.
So this is Arielle's trying to see if she can get a guest to cry on screen. I see what you're doing. No. It's,
and just tell me if this is going to.
No. I'm not ashamed of my son who's an addict. I'm not, and I'm empathetic. I can be frustrated, and it can. And dealing with an addict, any kind, is frustrating. Well, first of all, dealing with people is frustrating, right? Yeah. And nobody more frustrating than me, right? Like I'm the king of frustrating people, sometimes on purpose and sometimes just as a byproduct of my personality. So my son, Christopher, has struggled with addiction since, I don't want to say addiction, drug use, and recklessly since he was probably 13 or 14 years old. It's been an ongoing challenge. He's kicked out of several high schools. Now, if you ever met him, he is the nicest guy. Like, his heart is huge. He loves people. But, he also has whatever challenges are there. And, and I'll get to his addiction, but I mean, a case in point, his teachers would call me up because they had my number directly. Because I say, look, I'm going to tell you, he's going to talk too much. This is going to happen. There's going to be misunderstandings, and he's going to respond, negatively. You can call me directly anytime, night or day. I'll take your call. If he in class, I'll talk to him. And they'd call me, and his teachers would say, he doesn't fit. He's not the angry teen leaning against the wall, smoking. He might be smoking a cigarette, but he's not. He's more friendly, likes his teachers, would go and talk to them, but still get into trouble, right? So it's just always been that way. And so he, when he was 18, I asked him to leave my house. I said, look, I can't. There's just so much going on with conflict. And at that point, his youngest sister was coming to live with me, and it was even less Christopher, unfortunately, and we've shared this conversation. It was because of the world he was traveling in. There were people he was introducing to our home that created a risk that I just couldn't absorb, right? And I was very forthright. I go, look, I don't think you're stealing stuff from your sister or whatever, but be a byproduct of the world you're living in is that's occurred. Mm-hmm. So he really kind of understood it. One thing, so anyways, he's ended up on the street for a long time. I didn't know where he was. A couple years ago, I started searching for him, and there is nothing and what had happened is, as many people probably have, I responded to him growing up oftentimes with anger, and pretty extreme anger. Like I can go from, 0 to 100 miles an hour pretty quickly. And we've had our run-ins, as just, and I've said things I shouldn't have said.
Unlike any other parent and child relationship, right?
For sure.
Every other one is easy.
What's really funny is when I hear people say something like, oh my gosh, but that family, they're like perfect. And I go, then don't live around that family, because you're going to find they're not. Like all your ideals of that. I'm not saying they're not great, but it's just the nature of people, right? Conflict is what we have to deal with. How we navigate that is probably the more important skill is not to avoid conflict. It's how do we deal with it once we've gone there? Because we're going to go there. We're going to be, we're going to get tired, whatever it is, right? So my older son, he had worked with a ministry organization in Chicago that worked with the homeless. And hold on one second. Yes. I'm being asked that. He had worked with a ministry organization, and he got introduced to a guy named Johann Hari, who has a great TED Talk called Everything We Know About Addiction is Wrong. And he wrote a book called Chasing the Scream. And Johann Hari went and visited all these places that were approaching drug addiction differently and viewing addiction as more an issue of community and separation from community than it was about the chemical hooks and how we addressed addicts, which is really 100% opposite. And I've done it from what you wanted to, which is ostracize. When you're clean, you can be part of our family, not before that, Well, one thing I found in doing that is reading this stuff. I said, okay, I want to approach it differently. And I started going out to the street to look for my son. There's nothing as unnerving as I knew. Eventually I found out he was somewhere near Koreatown, MacArthur Park in LA, which if you've been there is a pretty rough place. I got very bold. I'd just go down there and pop my head in tents. Hey, you guys know this guy? I'd have his picture. And it's really weird. You walk up to some guy who's living in a parking lot and you say, do you recognize him? And he says, oh, I know him. Go to the Yoshinoya in the evening. That's where the people using meth go. And I go, okay, he's using meth. But it was weird to have some random addict of some other drug know my son. And that became became my introduction to this idea that there's a true community out there. There's an actual community, and it's a broken community like every other community. It's broken in that addicts will look out for each other, and then they'll steal from each other, and they carry Narcan. So if somebody ODs, they bring them back to life, and they've done this. Like, happens. This is the real life on the street. But I started to meet all these people, and eventually found my son, and they were like, people would come up to me saying, "Oh, we love your son. He's so nice. He always looks out for us. He does this." And the first time we had found him, one of the young ladies on the street who had said, "Oh, I know where he is. I'll get him. I'll bring him here." As we were leaving, she goes, "Hey, I just want you to know you're a really good dad. You did a good job raising him." And I was like, I'm driving away from my son living on the streets as a drug addict. That's a really weird compliment, right? Like, how do you absorb that? Because it doesn't feel that way, right? But over time, I got to know all those addicts. I would go. My son said, foot health is a big issue, not food. There's always plenty of food, but foot health, they don't. Clean socks just doesn't. So I would go to the 99-cent store, and I'd buy 30 pair of socks, and just give them out like candy, to everybody, right? And that was kind of what I did. And I got to know the drug dealers and the gang members, and they all were fine with me because I'm not there to fix anybody. I'm just there to check on my son. That's all I'm doing, So
That's a powerful thing to receive, that sort of message. You're a good dad. You did a good job in that kind of scenario. And to realize that, yes, both of those things can absolutely be true. Yes, you can be a good dad. You can be a good person. You can love your son, and your son can love you. And also, he can be an addict, and he can be, living on the street.
Yeah, I mean, and once again, I don't claim the mantle of being a good dad. Like, it's hard to observe, but I do what I guess I have done with my kids most of their lives, all my kids, is I've tried to make sure they knew they had a voice. And that was really important to me, because I had a mother who I have a voice. I mean, words have been pouring out of me since I could talk, right? And my mom said, you woke up, talking, and you fell asleep mid-sentence. Like, it was just, all day, then wake up. And so I wanted my kids to know they could talk, even very young. I always tell people, I'll give you another case in point. When Sarah and I moved downtown, she was going to that performing arts school, and we can get back to Christopher or any other topic, but she she had asked me, she said, I don't ever like the thing where, because I'm your father, that's why. You're right. She wanted the reason why things are a certain way. And I go, that's fine. And through all the time that we were down there, I didn't really have rules for her, except that she communicated with me, right? So, and I think on one occasion, we were going back and forth on something she wanted to do, and I was not comfortable with it. We were going back and forth. And I said, Sarah, I'm about as close to saying the phrase you don't want me to say as I've been. And she and I don't have conflict, really. And I said, how about this? Go to your room, because both of us our emotions are a bit high, and go there and just do whatever. And I'm going to just work a little bit, and let's get together in 30 minutes. And she came to me after like 30 minutes. She goes, Dad, well, what about this? And she had developed this compromise. And the compromise wasn't where I wanted things to be. But in my mind, I said, she did the work to work through her own thing, and she yielded something. I want to respect that. So I just said, yeah, that works. That works. And so I've tried to do that so that my, and it was another thing, it seems minimal, but I said, hey, Sarah, while you're in control of the radio, you run the music for the house. Okay. Now, we have the tendency, everybody does this. Whatever music introduced you, came up in your teens when all these emotions and hormones are changing, that is the most influential music you'll ever hear. It's the earliest introduction to whatever music it was. And so we tend to go, oh, back when I was a kid, the music was amazing. And now these kids, And I said, I don't want to be that. I don't want to, both as an artist, but also as a father. I don't want to be separated by this cultural gap from my daughter. Now, my kids have a pretty broad taste of music, and Sarah is just as prone to be listening to Peggy Lee as she is to, Haley or, Paramore or whoever. But on the flip side, I got introduced to Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco that I wasn't listening to, and I loved it, right? I've introduced some of the music and chorus transitional elements to my band. I've said, listen to this. I want us to do something like this. And that to me is really important. I would always tell people, another kind of backdrop of that is she was really into One Direction, like huge One Direction fan. And I would see so many parents when their kids were into something like that be like, oh, it's so cute. And I go, it's not cute to them. It's important to them, right? And Sarah's fully aware she's not likely that she's marrying Harry. But you know what? That's her crush in the band, and that's important to her. So I'm not going to dismiss it like it's not important. It is important. Because she's going to mature and grow anyways and have different interests come up. And I'm not like, why dismiss that,
Right.
So
have her own insight about it as time goes on.
Right. And a maturation of it. And look, they've told me they appreciate that I let them be them and didn't dismiss it as unimportant. And I tell people, I go, you should listen to what your kids say. They, or what I've said is, when your kids come to talk to you, treat it like it's important, because it is. Because if you want them to talk to you later and you've constantly been in the mode of, oh, silly kids, when you're older, it'll matter.
Right.
No.
Right. I want to ask you one more thing about Christopher. And I love that this veered into music, which of course is what this show is about, books and music. But I'm really curious about, I don't know your oldest son's name. What is his name?
Matthew.
So Matthew said something to you about 3 years ago, you said, I think, that helped to, it created a pivot for you. Some kind of shift from how you had been processing or maybe handling your situation with Christopher as a father-son dynamic into something else, and use the word grace before we went live. And I'm really curious about what was that thing that flipped for you.
Well, it was over time. First of all, I mentioned my faith. I always tell people, I'm a Christian. I'm just a really bad one. But I take seriously the idea of grace, that's something if I've received that, if I believe that, then I need to give that to others. And that's a super critical, important thing to me. And I don't think I was doing a very good job of that with my son struggling with addiction, right? Because we have the tendency, well, first of all, I grew up with hugely pragmatic parents, and came out of the Depression era, and not big on emotional huggy kissy, but very big on personal responsibility, right? And not punitive. Both my parents, neither one of them was particularly punitive. They were just kind of like, well, that this is not responsible. Be more responsible. It was just kind of expected, right? And so our family was raised that way, and what would happen is two things happen when somebody's an addict in the family. You get embarrassed. You're like, oh, he's in trouble again. He's kicked out of school again, whatever it is. And you internalize that. You make that about you, not about what they're struggling with, and you have to be really careful. And I've done it many times. It's almost like, I can't believe you did that to me, but they're not doing it to you, right? There's fallout that impacts other people, and that is something that addicts have to struggle with. That's a lot of the guilt when they come out of that. They have to deal with, oh my gosh, destroyed these relationships, did these wrong things. How do I rectify that? And that's a lifetime, that's their own burden that they have to bear. But so Matt really pressed me on the issue of grace. That's the first thing. He said, you know, are you creating a community that Chris wants to be a part of? Because he's part of a community now. Does he know that his family is always there as a community too? And that it's not contingent upon him being clean, that we don't ostracize him. When you get it together, then you're back in the family. No, you're my son. I love you. You know, Chris and I, our conversations most recently were about just that. I go, Chris, the biggest problem with fentanyl is not that I mean, I worry about the health impacts, all that stuff. But the problem, as you well know, is that fentanyl doesn't cost $20 to buy a couple hits on the street. Fentanyl costs 100% of everything. It takes everything from you. So you are welcome to contact me all the time. But what happens when you're in that is you disappear. And he knows this. So we can have these candid conversations. It's not meant to elicit guilt. It's meant to go, I want you in my life. And so Matt really, he pushed me to check out Johann Hari. I'd mentioned Johann Hari, who wrote Chasing the Scream and has a great TED Talk called Everything You Thought About Addiction or Thought You Knew About Addiction is Wrong, where he talks about the community aspect of it, how ultimately if people feel they have a community here that's safe, then why would they leave it? And when addicts get in that trouble and they're in that community is safe for them. And I've gotten to know that community. I mean, so much so that if we were to look at my phone and type the word street, you'd see 20 names. And these are all drug dealers and addicts that I would communicate with to locate my son. And they knew I'd go talk to them. I'd talk to them about their futures. I'd talk to them about anything, just have a normal conversation. And that was another thing my son said. He goes, the other thing that people on the street don't get is people don't stop and talk to them like they're human beings. Because then they're human beings, right? So that became kind of the impetus for me to try and interact with Chris and those people he was with on the street, is to try and understand, you know, and my son pointed out some other things. He's like, you know, that's Chris's challenge, and it's a very visible one for the world to see. We see them on the street and it's frustrating and whatever. But you know, I haven't managed finances as well as I should have. Is that not just as damaging? This person hasn't, whatever the case may be, they drive recklessly, but they're completely functional. So we don't see those, you know what I mean? That there's so many things that each of us do that maybe it's not addiction, but it's whatever foibles we have. And we're really effective at discounting our foibles and accentuating these other ones that are very visible, right? Right. So that was kind of where he pushed me, was to really consider that.
So what is, if you were to give a definition of grace, what is that? What does that mean to you?
Well, for me, I mean, I could go into I'm not going to go in really to a spiritual definition, but the idea is I'm going to, I told my girlfriend recently, I said, you understand, for whatever happens in life, you're forgiven before you ever ask for forgiveness from me. Like it's already, there's no penalty period. There's no, because I believe that was, if I believe the message of Christ, then I believe that was, and I don't want to get all, super spiritual religious, but if I believe that was given to me when I hadn't earned it, that it's something that is there for me, then I have to do the same for other people. So I have to be willing to forgive and understand and try and create community. And I can have boundaries. I can express frustration. I can even express anger, but it has to be appropriate, but also not vindictive, right? One of the things I've tried to say is, if I'm angry at somebody, I'm going to say, I'm really angry, or I'm really frustrated. I'm not going to say, you blankety blank, blank, blank. And it's not that I haven't done that, but I'm going, that's not communication. I can share why I'm frustrated, and let's have a conversation and solve this problem as much as we can,
So it sounds somewhat like not holding others to a different standard than yourself, kind of recognizing the humanity in yourself, and then um, and not insisting that the other people be flawless, that the other person, right?
Yeah, and look, and once again, you can have boundaries. There are people that I harbor no ill will towards them, but because they are, I'll give you a case in point. I have a hard, fast rule on people who are, let's just go back to art, but it could be applied to so many areas. I don't allow, and it wasn't so much for me, it was something I shared with my daughter because she received some criticism on her singing early on as she's learning to sing that was not it was not a critique in helpful. It was meant to be hurtful. It was meant to silence her, which is what the critic who comes from the outside does. So I said, those people need to be cut out of your life. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to be angry. It's just, that's their issue. Don't absorb their issue. So I have a hard, fast rule. If I'm doing something or expressing my art in some way, I'm putting out a song, I put out some lyrics. If anybody at any point is critical with a punitive intent or a people should be invited to be in the critique group, right? If they're not, they don't need to say anything. I don't know if you watch much of Brene Brown because I really think she hits it on the head. But, if you don't have an interest in the art, then don't have an interest. Move on. You're that's fine, and that's totally okay. But if you're going to say some, snide comment at any point, then you will be unfriended, blocked. I won't say anything. I don't make some public announcement on Facebook. People need to learn. Like, no, it's not a response of anger. This is a rule that I would recommend to other artists. And when I was recommending it to Sarah, at some point later, I said, oh, I should apply the same rule. And so it's already predetermined. So if it happens, I don't reach out to them. I don't say anything. I'm just like, okay, well, that's done. They've shown those colors. If they ask later what happened, I go, well, this is what happened. And it's just not allowed. So you can have boundaries, but for your own well-being, the boundaries, of course, should not be, well, I believe, shouldn't be reactionary. Where possible, you should try and talk to people. But they should, as much as possible, not be driven by like your anger in response. It should be, okay, I've established boundaries. I don't allow these things. So that, for instance, in personal conversation, if somebody were to cross those boundaries, you can say, hey, I don't allow that. Are you cool with that? I mean, you're allowed to think whatever you want, but that particular thing is not allowed, right? And if they, oh, no, I'm okay with that. I'm allowed to, okay, that's fine. Just not in my life, not in my circle. That's okay. I'm not telling you what you can or can't be. My boundaries are for me and my household, my life. And you can have your own. You might not like people who talk too much like me. That's fine. That's cool. Sorry, whatever. So that's how I try and approach it, I guess.
Yeah, you're making me think that a lot of times when we get angry, not all the time, but a certain amount of time, when we get angry, it's because we're actually not clear on our own values. There's something that's happening that's bumping up against our values, but we haven't clarified what those values are, and so haven't clarified what those boundaries are for ourselves. And so then we get angry when other people cross them, or when we've crossed them ourselves, but without having consciously recognized, oh, wait, that's a value that I have. That's sort of a do not cross line.
Sure.
It's non-negotiable.
It's and I think it's healthy to establish. Look, I also think it's unhealthy in most cases to be offended. And when I say offended, like, oh my gosh, that person said something that offended me. I received some advice from somebody years ago who said, where I was receiving some criticism that I didn't think was fair, and I was upset about it. And he said, well, he goes, here's what I could tell you. Here's a simple tree. And I don't know if you know, I wrote a couple books on careers in technology that were published by Pearson, a major publisher. They're used in colleges all over the place. Even though they're not textbooks, that's my largest market. But I included it because I was so impressed with what it did. It tries to extract emotional responses that aren't thought through. There's times to be angry, there's times to be angry, but we should still have an understanding of that anger, right? And make sure we're assessing things properly. So his take was, if somebody makes a criticism, here's the criticism. The first question, is it true? If it's not true, regardless of how it was said, if it's not true, disregard it. You don't have to respond to it. You're not required to convince. I always say, don't try and convince the unconvincible, right? You're not required to. So why enter that and get, okay, well, I appreciate that you have an opinion about that, which people hate about me because I'll just go, oh, I see you have an opinion. That's very interesting. And I move on. And they're like, wait, you're not fighting me? No, I don't need to fight you for that. But then the next thing is, if it is true, is it something you feel you need to change? Matt, you're abrasive because you're so direct. All right, I'm kind of okay with being direct. And I'm okay with people being direct to me. Now I'll gauge it with people who I feel may not handle being direct well, and I might soften things a bit, but the reality is I like being direct. My parents were direct. I like being direct. I like having the conversation. Let's put it out on the table, and that's cool. Like, and we don't have to agree, and I won't get angry, and that's fine. So, but if it, regardless of how they said it, if it is true and you feel, is it something you need to change? And you go, oh, yeah, I am a little harsh. I am a little mean, or I don't like how they said it. Maybe they said it in a way that's completely inappropriate. Oh, you're a blankety blank blank blank, and you're so this. Extract all the blankety blank blank blank. You're so this. Am I so that? I am. You know what? If it's true, set about changing it. And that was this guy's advice, and I thought, wow, it doesn't even give you room to get angry about almost anything. You simply process as not true, put it aside. Is true? Is it something I'm okay with that. Put it to the side. Something you need to change it.
Right.
Now they may be totally wrong in how they approached it. That's a separate matter from your, my girlfriend goes all the time, we'll talk about it. And she goes, you almost approach it. You have this Boy Scout kind of like integrity with it. And I go, wow, it's easier if I say, if I'm willing to assess and go, is that a true thing that I need to fix or should work on? Right. So when my son approached me, it didn't make me angry that my son, I don't have this attitude of, oh, you're younger, you're my son, don't tell me what to do. Right. Like, which seems weird, but people do that often that are adults. Even if their kids are adults, they just don't give them a lot of room to give them input. I'm going, no, I need to take input. They see things in me that I may not see. So.
Yeah. Love it, Matt. Thank you. I want to say a quick hi to Joseph Darusha. Joseph, I love that you worked in Jeff Buckley into the comment section. Anytime you want to, feel free to. Love that. Love that album, Grace. He mentioned it when we were talking about Grace. And Mark from Dallas. Hello, Mark. And anybody else who's watching, please say hi in the chat. Let us know that you're here and where you're watching from. So Matthew, this is a great moment for me to ask you, what have you been reading lately? Have you been reading? Do you like to read? What would you like to share with us today for the Tomes portion of Tomes and Tunes?
Yeah, what's funny is I'm not going to share from this, although I probably could. But so my daughter, who's the climber, her name on various social media is Dharma Rat. Okay, so she was a big Kerouac fan. And so I just picked up about a week and a half ago reading the Dharma Bums because I'd never read Kerouac, and it's been a very interesting experience. I used to read voraciously constantly. Hey, Tom. I used to read voraciously, all the time. And I mean, I favored that I was going to be a writer, not work in technology my entire life. So getting published by a major publisher was hugely gratifying, and I still plan on doing more of that. So I've read less for pleasure in the last couple years just because I've been working on a lot of stuff. However, I was going back through, and in part because I'm going to be presenting to another songwriter group, I've been reading On Writing by Stephen King.
Oh, yeah.
Have you read it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing because, once again, when he comes to the writing part, he's a pragmatist, right? And I favor pragmatism. So he kind of takes away excuses for inspiration, right? Because so many writers will kind of put, oh, well, I'm not feeling inspired, or songwriters all the time. Well, I have to be inspired to write that. And I kind of go, well, if you're think about professional writers, for instance, that write for nighttime television, for Jimmy Kimmel or Fallon or whatever. Could you imagine they're in the writer's room and there's topical things happening? They're supposed to write stuff that's happening that day. It could be it happened an hour before and we're going to include it. Can you imagine them going, I'm just not feeling inspired? Right. I'm not paying you for your inspiration. I'm paying you for your product, right? And I'm all for inspiration, but the one thing I found when I was writing was the one thing Stephen King talks about is close the door and write. Yeah. And it may not be inspired. It might just be the heavy lifting of the work. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. But his kind of take is, if you do the heavy lifting, your muse might know where to find you. But if your muse can't find you, at least you did the work. Yeah. And there's something to be said about that. So
absolutely. I'm totally in agreement.
Yeah. So this I just thought was interesting, because he also kind of boohoos the writer's retreat a little bit, and I kind of agree with that. I'm all for, going away to the mountains and finding yourself. That's great. I hike all the time. But as he puts it, you're sitting down to write. You're not sitting down to enjoy the wilderness. And so I thought this was good. He says, you can read anywhere, almost, but when it comes to writing, library, corrals, park benches, and rented flats should be courses of last resort. Truman Capote said he did his best work in motel rooms, but he is an exception. Most of us do our best in a place of our own. Until you get one, you'll find your new resolution to write has a lot hard to take seriously. Your writing room doesn't have to sport a Playboy philosopher decor, and you don't need an early American roll-top desk in which to house your writing implements. I wrote my first 2 published novels, Carrie and Salem's Lot, in the laundry room of a double-wide trailer, pounding away on my wife's portable Olivetti typewriter and balancing our child's desk on my thighs. John Cheever reportedly wrote in the basement of his Park Avenue apartment building, near the furnace. The space can be humble, probably should be, as I think I've already suggested. And it really needs only one thing, a door which you are willing to shut. The closed door is your way of telling the world and yourself that you mean business. You've made a serious commitment to write and intend to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. And I like that. It strips away the mysticism of creative output. And I think that's necessary sometimes.
Yeah, I both agree and disagree. Why am I echoing?
I don't know. It's interesting. And that's totally okay, because I get it. There are people, you won't be the first person to disagree with me.
Well, I agree. This echo is so irritating. I don't know where it's coming from, and I think it's the StreamYard service perhaps today.
It might be.
However, I love the idea of a door. Years ago, when I first moved to Los Angeles, I got a job at a talent agency, a major talent agency, and it was an open floor plan, which is amazing for extroverts and hell for introverts, and I am the latter. And also, I really just wanted to focus on my work. I was not planning on sitting at that desk forever, and so I really wanted to sort of get what I could get out of the job, learn as much as I could, sort of master that environment, and then figure out the next step from there. And
sure.
Because it was this open floor plan, I was a couple years older than all the folks around me. I had a lot of them were right out of college, and I had moved to LA. I think I was about 30 or something around there, and so they constantly were turning around to me, asking me questions, this and that. And I was like, oh man, I just want an office with a door. And the next job I got, part of the reason I took that job was because of that door. It was so great.
Yeah.
And also it was at that job that I ended up having a lot of downtime, and that was actually where I became a prose writer. And just in my downtime, the door was shut, and I would just work on stories, and it was, so I'm a huge fan of doors,
Yeah. Yeah.
very much
For
so.
sure.
Um, so I'll say that I love that you just shared that classic book. And is getting quite a lot of comments here. Hi, Tom, um, in North Hollywood. Love seeing you, Tom, here. And he says, clap, 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 walk the walk as well as talk the talk. But I think that was to something before the Stephen King part. What does Joseph say?
Let's see. I'm gonna.
Oh, here we. Gosh, I apologize to the viewing audience. Here we are reading the comments. You guys are
Mhm.
writing really interesting things in the comments. Um,
Well, one thing Joseph writes about, he says, I think there's a tie into addiction about what Stephen King said as well. Actually, it's funny because in the same book, Stephen King talks about how, he would give this flippant answer when he was, do you write, how often do you write? What days do you take off? And he said, I write every day except for Christmas and my birthday. And then he came back and said, in the book, he goes, that was kind of a fun answer for interviews. I actually write on my birthday and Christmas too, meaning he's a little bit addicted to it. But I kind of have the same. I wake up every day between 3:30 and 4:30 every morning, and I love my morning time with my coffee, and I do a lot of writing, and
I
that's
do
really
that,
great.
but about 3 hours after you.
Yeah. Most people are about 3 hours after me,
Yeah,
right?
I'm awake at about 6:20, and that's when I usually start writing with my coffee. But
Yeah.
and birthday is like essential. I usually do a lot of writing on my birthday actually. But there is a difference between um, addiction and a practice like writing. Huge difference. And it has to do with healthy and healthful practices. That you were saying, the thing about fentanyl is that it takes 100%. The
That's right.
test is 100%. And the thing about a writing practice is that it amplifies your life. It doesn't. It might you might write for an hour or however many hours, and so you could subtract that time from how many hours you have of the day and say, oh, that's the cost of it.
Right.
But I would really strongly argue, and I think most writers would, that it actually the additive factor to your life is you know many times more than the subtractive
Oh, for sure.
aspect of
One
it.
of the things that when I talked to Christopher, and one of the things we talked about when he did 142 days clean, he had all these other things he was into. He was playing guitar. He's actually a very talented musician. He was playing guitar. He was playing dominoes. He's a whiz with math, so he'd kill me in dominoes. And he just had these things he wanted to do, and so there are, whether we call them addictions or passions or whatever. One of the things that addicts have to find is that healthy
Hmm.
passion that can fill that space,
Yeah,
right?
the adding, yeah, that's again the adding in order to allow the other behavior, the other
Right.
pattern to drop away. Absolutely.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. Um,
Tom, we're both in
Tom,
Los Angeles.
I'm in Los Angeles too.
I'm
Uh,
all in LA.
and the funny thing is, Tom, I'll talk about getting up early. I love mornings. I love when I can get up here and I have my coffee and nobody's awake. Now that started when I had kids, and I was writing. Here. So this was the first book that I wrote. It's IT Career Builders Toolkit, and it's very proud of this. And then I wrote another book about careers in technology. And one of the things that was important to me is I didn't want to take away from my family's prime time in the morning, right? I was
Right.
already consulting during the day. So I said, well, if I'm going to write this book, it's going to occur before they are up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so writing from 4 to 6 a.m. worked for me.
Yeah.
And 2 hours of writing, and I type pretty quick, and I could do I could say 1,500 to 3,000 good words in a day. So so that was very productive for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sometimes a door is a physical door that closes and opens, and sometimes a door is, refers more to a window of time, and your window of time that you could kind of shut that door and have your own space was in those hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I'm going to share this one. I'm still
Yeah.
reading Ann Petrie's, let's see, it's too blown out, but Ann Petrie's The Street. And I'll probably finish it this week. So I think this is the last week I've been sharing parts of it the last few weeks. And this is a book that Ann Petrie published or was published in the 1940s. Matt, I just realized that when I mute you, I don't have that echo.
Okay, so I don't know how I'm causing that. I saw that.
So interesting. I don't know, StreamYard, I think they changed their settings or something like that. So I'm just going to mute you for a second while I'm sharing this. So this was published in the 1940s, and it's about it's a novel about a single black mother raising her son in Harlem. And let's see here. Do I have glasses? I do, indeed. Let's see here. What did I want to share with this? So she's struggling with a number of issues: racism, sexism, poverty, being a single parent, and trying to make ends meet as a woman, in all of the things. So she's trying to get off of the street, and I'll just start here. Streets like the one she lived on were no accident. They were the North's lynch mobs, she thought bitterly. The method the big cities used to keep Negroes in their place. And she began thinking of Pop, unable to get a job, of Jim slowly disintegrating because he too couldn't get a job, and of the subsequent wreck of their marriage. Of Bub, left to his own devices after school. From the time she was born, she'd been hemmed into an ever narrowing space until now she was very nearly walled in, and the wall had been built up brick by eager white hands. When she got off the local at 116th Street, she didn't remember having changed trains at 125th Street. She was surprised to find that Bub was waiting for her at the subway entrance. He didn't see her, and she paused for a moment, noting the anxious way he watched the people pouring into the street, twisting his neck in his effort to make certain he didn't miss her. She was so late getting home that he had evidently been worried about her, and she tried to imagine what it would be like for him if something had happened to her and she hadn't come. At this hour, there were countless children with door keys tied around their necks, hovering at the corner. They were seeking their mothers in the homecoming throng surging up from the subway. They're too young to be familiar with worry, she thought, for their expressions were exactly like Bub's, apprehensive, a little frightened. They're behind the same wall already. And I'll just leave it at that, and I'm going to unmute you, Matt. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear a perspective of somebody, wanting to get off the streets, and my experience on the streets, not in the same context, of course, but it is still, I can tell you from the people that I got to know on the streets, a separateness from the rest of society. You don't feel a part. They just don't feel a part, It's very interesting.
Yeah, different cages of different types.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, interesting. That's a great parallel. I'm glad that you mentioned that. Yeah. How about some music?
I can do that.
Song? Yay!
Sure. It's funny because I'm coming off a back injury, and I'm doing, today was amazing because I woke up suddenly able to move. It's been over 2 weeks. I'm supposed to be recording and producing a song a week right now for the next several weeks, and I literally am now behind 2 weeks because I couldn't record for 2 weeks, which is very frustrating. But this is one of the songs that I'll be doing. I wrote the song for my girlfriend Debbie, and we both have a bit of wanderlust and some plans to ultimately hike out of California, Los Angeles. We both love LA, but we also see opportunity and there's a big wide world out there, and my clients and the work I do not require that we pay LA prices. And there are other places in the Southwest that we can go to and use as a base of operations to create more art and to travel around a bit. So I wrote this song called The Path. We could catch a little break, my dear. Perhaps the timing could be right. Can you check to see the coast is clear? Perhaps we'll slip away tonight. This might play as irresponsible, but I don't really give a damn. The deck is stacked, the dice are loaded here. Take a chance and take my hand. In another time we might be troubadours, keeping the company of kings, or princes, paupers, and the people of the night, who laugh and drink and loudly sing. I'm not asking for a sacrifice, unless it's everything and all. I've thrown caution to the wind, my dear, turned my bow into the squall. All these matters of the heart are all that matters, so it seems. We found fit to find our feet upon this path, across those valleys, fields, and streams, to find our dreams. So this simple riddle we've been left, no ready answers and no clues, leave us guessing just like all the rest, and leave it up to me and you. The hero and the lover often fail, victims of avarice and greed. Let's choose to fail in the most heroic ways, with an appetite for lovers' deed. All these matters of the heart are all that matters, so it seems. We found fit to find our feet upon this path, across these valleys, fields, and streams, to find our dreams, to find our dreams. Whoa. Thank you.
Oh, very sweet song.
Thank you.
Are you thinking about leaving Los Angeles?
We are. We don't know exactly. The pandemic kind of changed our chances, or our running around and going and checking things out. Yeah. Debbie, unfortunately, had cousin pass away with COVID a few months ago, and she is understandably very hesitant to travel out. But now we've gotten our second vaccines. We consider the 23rd is our safe day. We're all done with everything, and then we plan on going out and because once again I can earn money from anywhere. We're going to go take a few trips. We're going to look at a few places in the Southwest. New Mexico's high on my list, but she has to see it, and we have to figure out how we're gonna, what that's gonna look like. So, but we're excited. Yeah.
Well, I just learned that shoot, I just learned that West Virginia is not in the West, but it is west of something. West Virginia is offering, I think, $12,000 if you move there.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that it actually, I think, as high as like 25,000 if you account for everything, because there's all these other perks they've thrown in. But no, I'm gonna stay. I want fewer bugs and fewer humidity and warmth. So the Southwest is kind of where I'm eyeballing, but we'll see.
Yeah, I love New Mexico. I'll see you out there.
Yeah, cool, good.
Go out there. I loved when years ago when I was on tour and spent a little bit of time in Santa Fe, especially. Oh, so beautiful.
It is amazing. Yeah, I looped around through Las Cruces, Old Town Mesilla, up through Ruidoso in the mountains, Albuquerque, Santa Fe. So really cool.
So awesome. Well, thank you. That was a really sweet song, and that's a beautiful guitar you're playing. What is that?
That's a Ibanez, and actually my two oldest kids bought that for me. I'd been writing songs forever, and they, it was at the time that their mom and I, it looks like things weren't going to go well there, and they were like, "You've waited, go play your music." And
play your music.
Yeah, kind of. It was really nice, really amazing.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, I am writing a song a week. So I loved hearing that you're producing a song, you're recording and producing a song a week. I'm writing a song a week, and so this is a song that I wrote last week. This is called the river dock at sunset. And I'm not getting an echo now, but Matt, I'm going to go ahead and mute you just in case. So
Understand.
while I'm singing. Let's see here. And thank you all for listening. I really appreciate having you here. This is such a fun show. So here we go, the river dock at sunset. On the river dock at sunset, beneath a crayon box of sky, last moments being supervised, cameras pinned us down like butterflies. We clipped flowers onto dresses, coupled off against the chill, cusp of honeysuckle summer evening, and every word we spoke full of meaning. On the river dock at sunset, the ones who taught us how to stand, reminiscing over rubber-soled shoes, wondering how we got to heels and hairdos. And constellations turn above the river that keeps flowing by. Time on earth keeps slipping by. There's a difference between keeping something safe and helping it to grow. And on the river dock at sunset, through the lens of passing years, half between leaving and lingering, we learn to love, we try to learn how to love without worrying. And constellations turn above the river that keeps flowing by. Time on earth keeps slipping by. There's a difference between keeping something safe and helping it to grow. On the river dock at sunset, along the worn and weathered boards, nothing's meant to stay but still. Whoops, oh, there we go. Nothing's meant to stay but still. Letting go is the hardest drill. constellations turn above the river that keeps flowing by. Time on earth keeps slipping by. There's a difference between keeping something safe and helping it to grow. Moments like the waves of the watershed on the river dock at sunset. The river dock at sunset.
Very nice, beautiful, and way braver than me. I will never play a song I wrote that week, because I know, it's a lot to remember, but it's beautiful, very beautiful.
Yeah, it is a lot to remember, but as I'm writing a song a week, if I don't play it and if I don't put that pressure on myself, it's like, oh, it's gone, and then 2 weeks later I will completely forget it. So it's like, well, if it's going to be 52 songs this year, it's got to,
Yeah, that's good.
And also it puts the added pressure on me because as I'm writing these songs, if I'm like, well, I'm just going to kind of do a toss away, throw away song, it's like, oh, okay,
Sure.
then I have a way out. But if I am planning, no guarantee every week that I'm going to play it on this show, but if I'm trying to do that, then it's like, okay, it's got, I can't write it as if, I can't write it from that mindset, oh, I'm just doing an exercise.
Sure. Yeah, very good.
It has to be meaningful.
Really nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Matt, it has been so awesome having you on the show. Thank you for being here.
No, I enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for sharing and your thoughts and your stories and your song, and it's just really nice. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it so much, and just we'll have to stay in touch. Definitely.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well,
Awesome.
before you go, actually, one question. Do
Yeah.
you have any shows, any live streams or anything like that you would like to share?
I don't right now. My focus has been to produce music. So I have a huge catalog of music that really, I have a problem of being very prolific. I write a lot of music, and Emiko has challenged me to produce a few a month. Because I can play everything, keys, whatever, get all of it except for drums. And she's just like, what happens is you fall in love with your latest song and it's your favorite song, and then the other stuff doesn't get done. So I'm really on a mission to get more of these songs more fully produced.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Matt, and we will continue the conversation on and on and on whenever we can.
Awesome.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And I'll just say goodbye to you all. Thank you for chiming in the chat, and especially thank you to Tom and Joseph and Mark. Appreciate you guys being here, and all the others who have been watching. Next week we have Rags Rosenberg, another Los Angeles artist, and he's my guest next week. And then we head to the East Coast and we'll bring in Stella Schindler from the DC area. So please tune in and join me. Please join my mailing list if you want to stay in touch with me and get some exclusive insider stuff, some gifts and music. That mailing list link is right there at that link tree. And until we meet again, take good care.